This is a global thing right now in what's called food inflation, where the same stuff you would pay $5 for all of a sudden becomes $6 or $8. In the UK, this food inflation rate is over 10%. In Japan, it's hitting a high that has not been around for more than 30 years. In the U.S. alone, just this past year, from like April 2021 to April 2022, food prices popped almost 11%, and the trend seems set to increase. History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Not food desserts, which would be a much more pleasant episode, but food deserts, food desertification. I was surprised. It's a fairly recent term. Did you guys know that? Like, this term only comes about in the 1990s.
I didn't know about it until the mid-2000s, frankly. So, there you go.
Yeah, and it's not a U.S.-created problem, or at least the language describing it isn't. It originates in Scotland when there was a public housing development out there in the 1990s, and it did not have access, like the people living there did not have access to healthy foods, to nutritious foods, let's say.
Right. And this idea describes something that you have doubtlessly seen yourself if you've ever been in what people would describe as the rougher part of a city. You know what I mean? Or everybody knows what we're talking about. Like you go by the strip in a community where there's nothing but dollar stores and fast food places. Mm-hmm. Right.
That's where I live. I live there. Every time a new thing opens, we're hoping, come on, restaurants. Nope, it's another gas station. It's really dollar stores, gas stations, barely what you'd even liquor stores, barely what you'd call a bodega. So it is. The reason I kept talking about McDonald's is because that's the closest thing resembling a restaurant that's near me. But, a lot of times areas like that also, of course, are ground zero for gentrification. And over time, they change, but it doesn't benefit the folks that have lived there for years who have had to deal with this food desert or this food shortage, and then are ultimately, unless their own generational property, are essentially priced out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that you're pointing out the intergenerational aspect of this. So let's break down this conspiracy. Food deserts earn their name because they're like physical deserts. They're areas where it is more difficult to hunt or gather nutritious foods. Basically, we're talking about hunting and gathering, still very popular with the human species. I
would maybe translate that to by foot, right? To walkable areas or places.
Just transit in general. That's another piece of the puzzle. So it's tough to traverse these areas. Think about like if you are in, and we'll get to an example of this in a second. But think about if you are in. You have grown up in an area that was historically segregated, quite possibly by the federal government itself. You got redlined, and later, policymakers of your municipality said, the perfect place to put an interstate through, it's this community, the ones who can't fight back. And so, boom, the interstate goes in. Now, let's say there was a grocery store that used to be a few blocks away, and you have to walk across somehow a 6-lane interstate just to get to that grocery store. Oh, and then add to that, the corporate owners of the grocery store close it down because they say there aren't enough profits to be made year over year. And then maybe there's public transit if you're lucky, but probably not. Probably not super great public transit. And let's say you take a bus. You take a bus to like a grocery store, a fancy grocery store, right? Like a Whole Foods or something. First, you can't buy anything super perishable because it has to survive that hour and a half again, if you're lucky, bus ride back to your place, and it's super expensive. How are you going to afford it? Why not? Why not just say, hey, we're going to have a night out and get the kids some fast food, right? Because, they're 4 or whatever. They're not going to know any better. It's going to be a treat.
Well, yeah, and even more common, just get food from like a dollar store or Family General or whatever they're called in that area, because you can actually afford that food. But it's going to be either canned or prepackaged or processed and just not as nutritious as something you could get from a larger grocery chain.
100%. Yeah. And lest we sound like we're talking down at all, right? I at least will speak for my part here. Dietarily, I am a walking garbage disposal. It is insane. Like I have never said no to any food. So I'm not I'm not a fancy organism. You know what I mean? So we're not here to preach to people or to lecture people on some sort of sanctimonious do better kind of speech. Those are inappropriate and they're not helpful. What is helpful, we hope, is to understand how this situation came to be in the United Kingdom, in the US, in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, all of Five Eyes, basically. People still don't understand what caused food deserts. Matt, in our preparation for this episode, you went into some maps regarding food deserts, right? And how these things zone. One of the most crazy parts of this is that we know some of the factors influencing these regions, and those can help us. Literally comparing maps that are studying seemingly unrelated, very specific things, comparing those maps and overlaying them will tell us how this situation took shape. And I argue it is a conspiracy, but it's an accidental conspiracy, as dumb as it sounds.
It's like a byproduct, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so. So, Matt, can you describe a little bit about these maps, just for someone who's unfamiliar?
Yeah, there's a map you can check out right now if you have the time. You can head over to the United States Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Service Atlas map. So you could probably find it by searching for USDA Food Access Research Atlas. That is the title of it. And it just gives you a full map of the United States. At least, does it include Alaska? I don't think it include. Oh, it does include Alaska, and it basically has all of Alaska as a food desert. Wow. It has 4 things you can click on from different years. Right now, I think it's just representing, what is this, 2015 and 2019, because it's got census data that it's using to make these calculations. Has to do with low income and then low access to food, and then putting those two factors together and essentially giving a score. And you can add or subtract variables on here, like how far of a distance a certain area is to a place that would have nutritious food. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you one specific here. If you zoom way down into Atlanta, into the area where I live, just to see how they categorize that area. And it's very interesting, guys. There's a strip that is a neighborhood where I used to live. It says that it is low income and low access at 1/2 and 10 miles. Now, if you click on that and try and get more information, it says low-income census tracts where a significant number of share of residents is more than 1/2 a mile urban or 10 miles rural from the nearest supermarket. So that would mean 1/2 of a mile from a supermarket. But if you've lived in that neighborhood, like me, you know that on one side of the neighborhood, exactly on the line where it says it's low-income, low access, there's a Kroger. And on the other side of that same tract, there's a Publix. So it makes me wonder how much of this data is just from census information, from like wide shot gathering of information, and then how much of it is actually drilled down specific information about families that really do not have access to food.
Yeah, it's like you bring up a great point. It's like Noel was saying, the question is access, right? Can you walk to this place, right? Can you walk home? Do you need a car? Yeah. And how current is this information, right? When most people think of a food desert, they don't think of a place where the line of demarcation is a Publix and a Kroger. By the way, side note, I find so many irrelevant facts, you guys. Kroger is about to buy another grocery chain. The monopoly continues.
It's Albertsons or something like that?
Yeah, you know the score. So maybe if podcasting doesn't work, we'll get into the grocery monopoly business. I'm becoming radicalized.
I want to be a deli man.
Into food research. But absolutely becoming radicalized.
Good. Well, but you'd make a great point, because just because there's a Kroger and a Publix there doesn't mean people can afford to buy even somewhat inexpensive foods there. Like some people just can't. So like, where would you get your food then, even if there is a grocery store?
Do you, Matt, delineate like priciness between Kroger and Publix? I've always thought of Publix as the more like upscale kind of, but I also, the one near me is always picked over and weird.
You'll get tricked. Yeah. You could get tricked because, look, I've been going to Kroger's for all of my adult life. There's always been one close enough that it's been my primary grocery store. And I've got one of those cards that they get you to sign up for, where you put all your personal information in there. And then,
Kroger. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you were Publix. Publix doesn't do that for whatever
reason.
No.
Well,
Publix is also way better to its employees.
It is. And no, you're right. But what I'm saying is I used to only go to Kroger because it felt like I was getting much better deals there, and I was saving a lot of money because of the system.
It's an illusion.
No, it's another conspiracy.
Yeah, I've recently switched, and it's nothing to, sorry, Kroger. It's just
K-Raj. Sorry, K-Raj. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful thing, man, because, well, it's an insidious thing, but it's beautiful that you're pointing it out and you're aware of it, because just like Sesame Credit in China, what happened with the Kroger discount card or whatever nomenclature they put on it is, in the beginning, to incentivize people, you could save some chump change, right, on specific items. But as it became more commonplace and normalized, the reverse occurred. So now, to get a regular price, you have the Kroger card. You're essentially getting taxed a little bit more if you don't play their reindeer game. Now, I don't know if Kroger is a sponsor of this. I don't think I'm saying anything controversial. I'm certainly not saying libel, because everything we're saying is true. This is
because it's a data game now, and it's helping the grocery chain know what to order, like who's buying. It's not necessarily you, the individual, buying specific things. It's more, what are the trends, right? What do we need more of? What do we need less of? But it's still gross.
They're not sweating. They're not up at night in a corporate boardroom with their shirt sleeves rolled up, terrified whether Paul Deckett will order more avocados.
Yeah.